On the 31st of December 2021, President Muhammadu Buhari signed the 2022 appropriation bill into law. The President had similarly assented to the 2021 budget on 31st December 2020. This underscores the administration's firm commitment to sustaining the return to a predictable January to December fiscal year since 2020, as well as enacting annual finance acts to facilitate budget implementation. The 2022 budget, titled Budget of Economic Growth and Sustainability, is valued at 17.126 trillion naira. Coming on the heels of the presidential assent, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, today made a public presentation of the approved 2022 budget of the Federal Republic of Nigeria with a breakdown and highlights. Now, on this episode of Nigeria Today, we shall be looking at the critical sectoral allocations of the budget. I am Lydia Ochi. Welcome to the program. With me in the studio to discuss highlights of the 2022 budget is Dr. Tokpe Fashuwa. He is the CEO, Global Analytics. Welcome to Nigeria Today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
And Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
The January to December fiscal year, which resumed in 2020 after decades of delay in passage of budget, has been applauded by many financial experts. Does this really have any advantage for the country?
It's important to be timely in some of these things. Like I say, that the budget is actually the most critical document in any country in a given year. It's the document that gets everybody's attention, and from which people begin to look at, okay, what's the likelihood, what's going to go on in the coming year. It affects their businesses. It kind of catalyzes a lot of businesses as well. It must be said that anywhere in the world, the government is still the largest spender anywhere in the world in any kind of economy. No matter how big a lot of these companies grow, the government has a reach to provide for the entire population, including those who may visit Nigeria during the year, including aliens who will come to Nigeria. So it's a massive instrument, and of course, the earlier the better, so that people can plan. There used to be a time in the recent past when sometimes we would end up approving the budget eventually in September of the given year, and so that creates a terrible, if you like, quagmire for government, because if you approve so late, when then do you implement? So it's good that the government has struggled to bring it back to normalcy, whereby from the 1st of that January, we intend that this budget should kick in, and of course they're trying to make sure that is happening. So it's a very good positive development. The government budget catalyzes everybody else, and it's a way of priming the economy for the private sector to be able to do well. It's very important. Infrastructure is needed. Every critical sector of the economy must keep working. Security is important, health, education, and what have you.
Okay. Now, a public presentation of the 2022 budget valued at 17.126 trillion naira was made today by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. What are your major highlights from the budget?
Well, I'll say that in the first place, 17.12 trillion sounds like a very good number. I've actually been an advocate of Nigeria, thinking about the per capita budget that we do, and also look at our budget in dollar terms. I wrote several articles in the past saying that, look, we need to ramp up to something like 15 trillion, but now they are 17 trillion, even though if you like, you could also say, well, the naira has been devalued in that time. But you can see that the government is breaking out of the old mold of, oh, let us budget small. We can't fund it. Listen, it's the lives of people that are at stake here. It's not how elegant your budget looks or how how well you can fund it. In fact, budgets are used to challenge organizations and the countries, if you like. So you have to be positive. You have to be optimistic about what you can do, and you have to use it to drive yourself as well. So if you decide to cocoon yourself in mediocrity and say, well, let's just do what we can do and just coast so that we don't put ourselves under pressure, you're going to also end up finding yourself in serious problem, more deeper poverty for the people. Before you know it, riots on the streets and all of that. So 17 trillion looks like a good number. Of course, and like I said, the discussion that the minister had today also centered around how do we fund it, and there are some initiatives they're taking already to try and fund it, apart from the fact that yes, of course, it's going to be a net deficit to our budget. Questions were asked about when the government intends to be able to balance the budget, having run deficits for quite some time now. At some point, government should think about balancing the budget, even declaring surplus at some point in time. All of it is projection. But as you project, you also put on your thinking faculty to say, what can we shift around? For example, the minister spoke about, some introduction of a tax on carbonated drinks, which is spot on. That's what's the global standard now. Everything that may cause health issues for your people, alcohol, cigarettes, sugary drinks and what have you, you have to make provision by way of excise duty. And in fact, in some places it's really high. A packet of cigarettes, I hear, for those who smoke in Nigeria, they probably will buy for maybe 500 naira. I don't know, I don't smoke. But in a place like Canada, you find that same is an equivalent of about 30,000 naira, that packet. Wow. Yes, and that's how countries make money. That's how they survive. So Nigerians must also begin to know that they need to be cooperative. We chip in a little bit and, of course, expect our government to do right by us. Mistakes have been made, it must be said. So 17.1 trillion looks like a good number, and I take it from there. Of course, the defense budget is the chunk of it. So 13%, which are about 1.3 trillion thereabout, is going to go on maybe about 1.9 trillion. Is going to go on defense because, of course, government has to ensure adequate security of lives and property so that people can do business and the private sector can thrive. Okay, now let's talk about funding. While presenting the breakdown of the 2022 budget, the minister explained that projected aggregate revenue to fund the budget is now 9.01 trillion naira. With 65% of the fund to come from the non-oil sector. How significant is this, considering that the federal government has been preaching for a shift to a non-oil-led economy? Right, so what we've found out is that by way of performance, the 2021 budget showed that the non-oil sector actually is really kicking in. I think has been able to relegate the oil sector to less than 20% of the economy, and which is good. And that's one way of diversifying. Another way of diversifying is to ensure that local consumption, domestic consumption kicks in, and the other sectors of the economy also pulls their weight, so that Nigerians can produce a lot more of what we need for ourselves. Okay, it's a branch of economics. Some people believe that Nigeria should just throw open the door and let anybody bring in anything, and we go and compete. And of course, that's the mistake we made since 1986 by going down that liberal hill of economics, which we weren't prepared to, and we still are not prepared to do that, no matter what anybody says. Many of the big economies in the world, they protected their economy to a certain extent before opening up. Well, China only joined the WTO in 2001, and before then they made sure they did their homework. But we are not doing our homework here, and some people who are ideologues, they come and push us into things that we cannot cope with. So to that extent, I think we're on the right track now. I wish some of these things had been done a little lot earlier. So yeah, we're going to see how this one pans out, but the numbers we're seeing, the projections, and even the revenue. Now, if you look at the revenue issue, 9 trillion vis-a-vis 17 trillion. That looks like a huge deficit going on there. But I think there are two things I saw in the government budget. Number one is that in 2021, between January and November, the government-owned enterprises were able to remit about 520 billion naira more, okay, than they did in the whole of last year. So we're saying that in 2021, I mean the whole of 2020, in 2020 about 510 billion came in, but 516 billion, but in 2021 up to November, the government already brought in 1.103 trillion from the government to enterprise, because they set the rule for them and say, you know, you must remit at least 50% of what you take. So the NPAs of this world, and you know, if you like, all the guys that take money from Nigeria, maybe the FAN, the NCAA, all of those big organizations that take money on behalf of Nigeria, they charge customers for use. They are now forced to bring in something to the table, at least 50%. And before we knew it, Nigeria has been able to get half a trillion. So imagine if you take 2 or 3 of such initiatives, you will find out that you are reducing that deficit by way of revenue generation. A lot of these things are Nigerians also playing tricks as well. And of course, even many Nigerians who complain about nobody seems ready to chip in their own end of it. You know, people build big properties and they don't want to pay property taxes. They don't want to, they sell properties, they make huge gains, they don't want to pay capital gains taxes. You know, so all of these things that I think eventually, of course, also incorporating the complaints from the people, suggestions by people who are not in government and so on. The government seems to be sitting up and ready to do a lot of things. So what I'm saying is that you may find out that if things go well this year, the government may make some 3 or so trillion naira that hasn't actually been budgeted for, but you know, not projected and added in the budget, but that comes in by way of cash flow unexpected as a result of the finance bill. What the finance bill does, okay, which we've always had, even in military days we used to have it, but all of a sudden in the civilians came, they kind of forgot about it. In the military days there used to be edicts every year that will say, in this new year, pay as you earn is going to go at this rate. Okay, we're reducing this, we're increasing this. You know, company income tax will be this rate, that rate. You know, so every year you have to set the benchmarks, and that's what's done almost everywhere else in the world, in the UK, in Ghana, in South Africa, and so on. So this is always a strict rule in parliamentary systems, but of course, even presidential systems, they do that. So bringing back this fiscal bill idea since last year is a very, very important thing. It kind of sets you straight and lets the people know and reminds the people that the power that government has is setting the rules on taxation. And of course, it's not only taxes. Government is not only entitled to taxes, government is entitled to taxes, to duties, to rent, to rates, to fines. Okay, the whole gamut of what government can take. Sometimes they reduce some of it. They can look at, okay, people are suffering, let us reduce pay as you earn, but we're going to increase company income tax by a notch. Let us, increase VAT, let us reduce this one. And of course, that dynamism. And in fact, I tell you what, and that's what some people miss when they talk about that Nigeria is not restructuring. That is a way of it's part of the restructuring, and it has to be dynamic from year to year.
Yes, you actually touched a bit about the budget deficit, and I was going to ask you about what your take is on borrowing to finance a part of the budget, but that will be after the break. Let's go on a break. We'll be back to continue the discussion.
This is NTA News 24 broadcasting from Abuja. You can watch us anywhere, anytime on the following platforms. For more information, log on to our website www.nta.ng or join us on our social media handles, Facebook at NTA News 24.
For comments, suggestions and inquiries, send an email to news24@nta.gov.ng or call us on the following numbers.
NTA News 24.
News and more news.
Thanks for staying. The program is Nigeria Today, and we are discussing highlights of the 2022 budget. Dr. Tokpe Fashoa is still here with us in the studio. He is the CEO of Global Analytics. And before we went on the break, we talked about the budget deficit. The overall budget deficit for 2022 is 6.39 trillion naira, representing 3.46% of the GDP. This deficit is to be financed by borrowings. So like I earlier asked you, considering recent concerns raised in several fora on borrowing, what is your take on borrowing to finance a part of the budget?
Well, it becomes a necessity for now, even though I don't like the idea that much. However, you look at it from a very pragmatic perspective, it is a necessity because except you don't want to budget high on the expenditure side, okay? The only option you have is to crash the expenditure. Before you know it, there's a way you crash the expenditure, you won't even find money. You wouldn't have budgeted for money to even pay salaries itself, so you don't want to do that. For bigger budgets, I'm saying that even now, given the fact that we've devalued our currency, given the fact that inflation has eroded a lot of things. As a matter of fact, if you look at the price of rice, when I checked, I went into a shop recently, local rice, Olam rice, was 26,000 naira. In 2015, it was 8,000 naira. So we're talking about 250% inflation over 6 years or thereabouts. That's not good for the people at all. Now, so you cannot reduce budgets. You can only increase. In fact, I'll be pushing for something like 30 trillion budget in the next year. That's the kind of numbers we want to see. And then we then challenge ourselves heavily on the revenue side. So if you're doing that, so the point is this, that for several reasons you have to borrow. The fact that if you are projecting to do more for your people than your revenue can finance, if you are projecting to build infrastructure, for example, which are long-term in nature, and you need to borrow money now and lock it down into the future, why not if not? What I would have wanted though would be that the borrowings that we do will be project tied strictly, so that we can basically say that, okay, we're tying this to project strictly, okay? So we say, are you borrowing for rails, for aviation, for roads that to be tolled or tollable? I don't believe that we should borrow to build schools in the village. Okay. I think that should be financed with internal generated funds. There's still some borrowings that go into that area which I don't like. There are even some borrowings I see, World Bank borrowings are going in such areas. These are black holes, we shouldn't be borrowing for what we should be using internal revenue to fund. Village roads should not be built with borrowed funds from anywhere in the world, because you would never be able to toll those roads to collect the money back. So you should challenge yourself as a government to use internal revenue to build such roads. So we probably would not be able to escape borrowing for now. Of course, it looks very, very scary. Already we're using, according to the ministry, about 74% of our revenue to service loans already, which is not sustainable if you ask me. Yes. Not sustainable. So, however, there are many areas of revenue that we are not exploring. When Minister Okonjo-Iweala was here, for a couple of years, she spoke about luxury taxis and so on, which she never actually affected. And of course, the people who have come after her have also not affected that, because the rich seem to be protecting themselves in Nigeria. And we needed the luxury taxes. We needed luxury taxes on private jets and so on. All of that disappeared. We're not hearing about that anymore. And that's where the money is. You take money from the surplus sector to fund the economy, like I said, and all of these people, what this was saying, they know what obtains abroad, and it's normal. Even in Ghana here, I tell you what, you go to Ghana, you go to a normal restaurant, and you're going to be charged 17.5% VAT. You're going to be charged in a restaurant. You're going to be charged 1% tertiary education fund in a restaurant. You're going to be charged 1% national health insurance. You're going to be charged 1% COVID levy. You're going to be charged 1% tourism fee in a restaurant. So, but you come to Nigeria and everybody just kind of intimidates the other. Of course, we know that governments could have done a lot better before now and even now, but we cannot be doing this to ourselves. It's a race to the bottom. If people don't want to pay their dues by way of taxes and so on, businessmen also want to shaft the government and not pay the adequate duties that they should pay and all of that. And of course, we have problems with corruption on the other side. What happens is a race to the bottom, that the country that should be doing a lot better in terms of driving volumes and preparing for children unborn we'll be all fighting over peanuts, and that's what's going on now.
Okay, now let me ask you one more question. At the public presentation of the budget, the document referred to revenue as a major fiscal challenge in terms of collection, expenditure, management, and fiscal sustainability. What will be your proposal on surmounting this challenge?
Well, revenue is it. Even though the minister believes that we have a revenue challenge, I personally think, well, unfortunately, this revenue challenge has now translated into an expenditure challenge, into a debt challenge. So we have challenges on all fronts, on revenue front, on the quality of our expenditure, where we're spending money. We see that, of course, we try to do zero-based budgeting at some point, but that had to be jettisoned. I think we're back to envelope system. People sit in their offices, they think, okay, what are we going to buy next year? Oh, let's buy a few more cars. Hey, some expenditures need to be locked down, if you ask me. In the United States, in the 30s, they went into a Great Depression. When they were going to come out of Great Depression between 1942 and 1944, in the United States under Roosevelt, they locked down the system and said that nobody will buy any new car in the United States. No company should produce any new car. They recalibrated for the war effort, and they were using that they were using those factories, General Motors, Chevrolet, all those people, Ford Motors, to produce jets, fighter jets instead. And that was how they were able to go, because it was a general effort. It was a combined effort. Everybody chipped in. Okay, and they were able to use that time and coalesce their efforts to get out of the Great Depression. Nigeria is also at war, an economic war, and an elevated security challenge that's driving people away from Nigeria rather than bringing in investment. People are also thinking in terms of taking money abroad. Nigerians are some of the most externalized people in the world. People call me every day and say, "Oh, come and come and pay for second citizenship," and I'm wondering, why will I go and start all over again at this point in time? But so many Nigerians don't have belief in their country, and they go abroad. Unfortunately, sometimes they get abroad and then they come back and they start cursing the country and all of that when they find out that it's not as easy as they thought abroad. So it's all a collective effort, if you ask me. The debt will be there, the challenges will be there, revenues can be ramped up if the government and the ministry, if they continue along the trajectory from what I saw they projected today, perhaps they'll be able to reduce that deficit projection a little bit by driving up revenue. If the excise duties on carbonated drink kicks in, if you ask me, I would have thought, well, okay, it's 10 naira per liter of, let's say, Coke or Fanta. 10 naira, it's not a lot, because a bottle of Coke is maybe 50 cl, so that's 5 naira they're adding on that one. But of course, when you look at the volume, it will amount to a lot if they're able to capture that money properly, and if they're able to also ensure that the retailers don't add more than that 10 naira to that, because people wait for opportunities like that to add money in Nigeria, and they believe that the final consumer is the one that will bear the brunt. So you may realize that the government may be able to collect good money, and they should continue to put pressure on the government-owned enterprises. We're still losing quite a bit of money. Imagine that 500 billion was got from these people additionally last year alone. This is 500 billion that would have gone into the pockets of the same Nigerians, many of whom complain about how bad the country is.
Let's ask for a final question. In less than a minute, the federal government projected Nigeria's base oil price at $57 per barrel in 2022 in consultation with NNPC and other stakeholders. However, the National Assembly increased the proposed 2022 oil price benchmark of 57 to 62. Now, do you foresee any serious implications from this adjustment?
No, I don't actually. Even though the National Assembly is always doing that, always increasing, because they're always thinking in terms of how much money will come in. Sometimes they've not been conservative enough in some years past. They've made huge projections that didn't turn out that way. Okay, let me say this: the price of oil is totally random. It's totally random. Okay, I mean, in 2020, we saw the price of crude oil going to as low as zero. At some point on a day in April last year, April 2020, it went into negative. You had to pay people money for them to take a barrel of crude oil off you. So, but it looks okay now. We're looking at $80 now. It's going towards $80 of Brent crude. It doesn't look too risky, but I think caution. I think that we should also project our revenue beyond crude oil and look at other areas that government can also make money.
Sector. Thank you so much. We really learned a lot from what you had to tell us today. That's it on tonight's episode of Nigeria Today. Dr. Tope Fashoa, CEO Global Analytics. We do appreciate your insights. Thank you so much. And we also thank our viewers for always being there. Don't forget you can also watch these and other editions of other episodes of the program on youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. Goodbye.